Hi, Lori here on Vancouver Island. Thank you so much for popping in today to join us. Today we are making soap. So I do have another video on making soap where I kind of went into a little bit of my history about making soap and why I do it and all that. And I actually had for a while there I made soap, not really commercially, but I did sell it at a few markets and stuff like that. And one of the ladies who bought soap from me several years ago called me over the holidays and has requested that I make her a batch of soap. So I'm going to do it. It's also time for me to make more soap for us. But so I thought I'd just go over the basic steps again for you. So one of the things that you want to remember when you're making soap is that different types of oils have different heat flash points, and that makes the difference in how much lye you actually use. And the amount of lye that you use in your soap makes a difference to how hard your soap is in the end after it's cured. So some people like kind of a gel-like soap. Other people like a really solid, hard, rock-hard soap. And so the more that you make soap, the more you can play with that. But what I have found is that when you add my recipes that have a higher amount of soap, where I go with a 6 or a 7% lye solution as opposed to a 5% lye solution, those soaps are harder in the end. So when you're making your recipes for your soap, and I go to Brambleberry. So there are two places that I found for recipes when I was making my own recipes for soap. Now I just keep the stuff on hand for making my favorite soaps, and it's that easy, right? So Brambleberry, and I'll hunt down there, and I'll put a link down below to their. Maybe I'll even see if I can find the calculator for making your own soap. So what you do is you say how much soap you want in the end. For example, this recipe is for 40 ounces. And then you plug in the oils that you have. And I believe that it will calculate even the percentages of each different oil that you should put in, and then the amount of lye and the amount of water that you use. So my recipe with a 6% lye solution is 5.8 ounces of lye and 13.2 ounces of water. So I'm going to get that stuff measured up, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how we get that mixed together. Okay, so step number one is to, well, of course, measure out your lye and your water. You want to use some kind of a purified water. I use a filtered water. Some people say you need to use distilled water. I have never bothered. Anyway, you want to add your sodium hydroxide. This is what you use, sodium hydroxide, lye. You can make your own lye, I guess, from ashes. I have never tried to do that. So this is really the only part of it where you need to wear gloves, because lye can burn. If it gets on your skin, it hurts like heck. So you want to add it in a little bit at a time, and you can see I've got an old raggedy towel down under here. But so you want to mix that in a little bit at a time and keep stirring it until it is clear. So this is going to get hot. It can get up to like 160 degrees. You can see it's still kind of cloudy, but I'm actually going to move it over here to the stove. I'm going to keep stirring. And you don't want to stop stirring, because it will form clumps if you stop, and they're just a pain to have to work out. You can see it's getting clearer. Okay, so the lye needs to cool, so now it's time to measure out my oils, because while my lye mixture is cooling, I can get these hard oils into a pot and get them melting. What I'll want to do is I'll want to mix them together when they're close to the same temperature. I usually go for about between 100 and 110 degrees. Seems to be a nice temperature for me to work with. So I'm going to get these oils measured up and get them to melting. So, okay, my coconut oil has all melted. It's nice and warm. So I'm going to pour it in here with my olive oil and my canola oil. Put that in the sink. And then my mix here, if you can see that, that's come to 100 degrees. And boy, am I glad I had those gloves on, because I just splashed that lye up onto myself. And that would have been bad if I hadn't had gloves on. That would be burning, 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 I tell you. So something else that I put in my soap, and one of the things about homemade soap, and one of the reasons that you make homemade soap, is that you don't want the preservatives and the chemicals and all that they put in soap, commercial soaps, to preserve them. So that's why you make your own soap, so that you don't have those. I don't know, well, I mean, you can go places and buy homemade soap that's been made just like this. Just ask for cold processed soap and you can get nice, pure, clean soap. Ask to see their list of ingredients. Sodium hydroxide is lye. You cannot have soap without lye. If someone tells you that they made soap without using lye, they are lying. So, yeah, anyway, I'm going to just give this a little bit of a stir since I threw that hot into the cold. So the point that I was getting at is that because you're not using all of those preservatives that they use in commercial factories, your soap will have a shelf life. So it's usually several years. And it depends on how fresh the oil is when you make the soap as to how long the soap will last. If you make soap with oil that has turned or is close to turning, it is not going to turn out. But anyway, so I don't add any preservatives. However, I do add a couple of natural preservatives. One of them being tea tree oil. Can you see that? I'll bring that up. Tea tree oil. And so I'm just going to add a couple of drops of that into my oil mixture. And then I've also got some pure vitamin E, which is another natural therapeutic. And I'm just going to drop a couple of drops in there of that. And then the other one that I like to use is rosemary oil. And I didn't pull it out. You know, I don't usually use all three. I'll usually use 2 of the 3. Because that's just what I do. Anyway, so here comes the interesting part. So you can see here, this is my essential oil. This is a geranium essential oil. And I already put the big jar back. But that is the scent that she asked for. She hasn't been able to find geranium soap anywhere, which I guess nobody makes it. I don't really either, but I have geranium. I just happen to have geranium essential oil on hand from when I was making geranium soap. And so, yeah, she's helping me out too, using up some of this stock that I'm planning on using up in the next little while. Anyway, I like to strain, well, especially with this lye mixture. One thing that I have found with it, and I don't know if you can see that in there, but it's got little floaties kind of in it with it. They're just little impurities, and they may have been impurities that were in the glass already or impurities that were in the sodium hydroxide. But either way, I like to run it through a strainer. And you can see almost immediately it starts to thicken up. Now I'm only going to stir it for a second with this. And oh my gosh, hats off to the women in the past who made their soap by hand all the way. I tell you what, I have a little hand mixer here, and I'm going to pull that out, and we'll go from there. Oh, and by the way, remember that when you're making soap, you do not want to use the utensils that you are using in your kitchen for baking or cooking with in your soap making. You want to definitely have your own soap making tools. So I like to mix a little bit and then stir and then mix and then stir. And so what we're looking for is a certain consistency in our soap. And so what we're looking for is a certain consistency. The consistency is known as trace. And I'll show you when we get to it. We're not there yet. We're still too liquidy. And it can take a few minutes. Even with this, it can take several minutes. So I can just imagine how long it would take doing it by hand. And I have to tell you, this is the part where you want to be wearing some kind of a rubber glove, because during this process where your lye and your oil are mixing, this is when it's hot still and can burn you because it's the lye, right? Now once it goes through the process of mixing, so you can see that it's getting a little bit thicker, and you can see that I'm starting to get some light lines on here. So that's a very light trace. I want to go a little bit thicker than that. Oh, actually, I'm going to throw in, now that I'm at a light trace. Now, this is where you would split it if you were coloring it. I'm not coloring it at all because I like it to be natural. If you were coloring it, here's where, when you get to this light trace spot, and you can just see, oh, that's maybe not quite enough. Sometimes after you stir it, it dissipates a little. Yeah, that's not quite enough. Let's do it a little. That's better. Okay, so when you get to a light trace, and you can see that, I'm hoping that you can see those little lines that are on the top of the soap. So that's a light trace. Now I'm going to stir in my essential oil. And that may seem like a lot. That was almost 2 ounces of essential oil, but the saponification process is really hard on essential oils. There is a chart that I use, again, I believe it's from Brambleberry, that allowed me to calculate how much essential oil to put in, and I only do a light or a medium scent. And I tell you what, the medium scent I don't do for myself at home. I just do a very light scent for at home, if I scent it at all, up to a medium scent. I don't care for it to be any stronger than that. And I don't ever use a perfume. I always just use essential oils. So you can see now that I've added that essential oil into it. It's kind of loosened up a little bit, and I've kind of lost that trace. So I'm going to bring it back to trace. Give it a stir. Doesn't take so long after you've gotten it there the first time. Oh, so that's nice. I'm going to go a little bit more because I want a little bit of a thicker trace. I find that the thicker you make your trace, the harder your soap ends up as well. You don't want to go too carried away because then you just end up with clumps. But I am going to go just a little bit longer. There we go. Okay, look at that. That is just beautiful. Oh, you know what? I'm going to go a little more. There we go. Look at that. Nice and thick. It's like the consistency of a thick, yummy pudding, right? It's very... Don't eat it. I know it looks delicious. Don't eat it. I make a chocolate soap, and I do a chocolate soap with orange scent. And oh my gosh, it smells like you could eat it. I use real cocoa butter, and this definitely smells like a flower, so I don't know that anyone would want to eat it. But I'm just scraping this off. I'm going to give you a tip, too, for cleaning your soap dishes. So everything now has been, well, it's not completely saphonified. You have to let it sit and harden, but it is mixed very well. And it is now soap. It really is. If I leave those to sit overnight, they will become soap. And okay, I'm going to go ahead and get this poured into my molds. Look at that thick deliciousness. Yeah, she liked, I know that the last soap that I made for this lady, or the last soap I made of this type, of this geranium type, was a really nice hard soap. And so I'm thinking that this is going to be just what she wants. Okay, I'm going to finish getting these little guys filled up, and I'll come back and show you what we do at the end. Okay, so here's something that you do need. Let me move this. I think we're still recording, aren't we? Yes. Okay, so old towels. I mentioned needing old towels. So now what you want to do is you want to wrap it. And the reason that you're wrapping it is because you don't want it to cool down too quickly. I don't remember what the reason is that you don't want it cooling down too quickly. I think it has to do with cracking and drying and not properly saponifying, which is the word for soap. So I have these little plastic things that I put on top of here, and I'm going to just wrap this in this old towel, and I'm going to tuck this away, and I'm going to do the same with this guy. I've got another old towel here. And I've actually, like, I keep these towels full size because I use them for my soap. But they're just rag towels. They've been okay, and again, I've got a top for it, and the reason I put, and then this, Dave custom made this for me, this little case that holds it, because I have these silicone little trays for making my soap with. Anyway, we're going to cover that, we're going to wrap it up, and I'm going to tuck these away overnight, maybe for 2 nights. I'll check them tomorrow, and we'll be back to see how our soap looks. So here we go. Here is our soap that we made the other day. It was actually the day before yesterday. I let it sit for 2 days. I checked it yesterday and it was still a little bit, really, like, quite soft. It's still quite soft. So it's going to need to sit for a nice long time. I'm going to grab a piece of parchment to put down there. Anyway, so here is our lovely, lovely soap. It sure does smell. Look at the color, though. This is what a natural colored soap looks like. And I use pretty light colored oils. When you use more darker oils, like more of the olive oil and stuff, it gets almost yellowish, like an almost beigey. Oh, I guess I should have pushed this down a little bit, eh? I've got air bubbles. One thing, though, is it is now soap, and thus easy to wash off. What do you want, Tabby? She gets mad when I talk, right? Because I'm not talking to her. What? What? Good grief. Da, 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 da. Look at that beautiful, beautiful soap. That's how easy it is to make. It's like super easy to make. I was quite surprised. I was scared when I first went to make soap because I had heard terrible, horrible things about lye and the dangers of lye, and oh my gosh, it can burn you so bad. And it can. Don't get me wrong, it can. But it doesn't come jumping out of the pot to get you. You know, it's not a monster, and as long as you're careful and you treat it with respect, like you saw, I wore gloves when I was handling the lye. Come on, baby. There we go. And there's my almost 40-gram bar of soap. So again, Honey made this for me, and it's from this stopper here to this groove here is 1 inch, and it's gotten a little warped over the years, but you know. So, but this way I get even-sized bars. Relatively even, anyway.